music you just heard, the crying, the whining, and the utter joy of the clarinet and the trombone and the mandolin, all the other instruments you just heard, was made possible by the Chicago Klezmer Ensemble, which was really a throwback to Eastern Europe and New York in the early 20th century. And with me now, I'm pleased to introduce to you the co-leaders of that group, Stuart Rosenberg and Kurt Bjorling. Thanks so much for being here. That music, you don't hear that at punk bars. We don't hear that at other kinds of bars. Easy listening. What is the need for a group like that in Chicago?
Well, I can tell you where we're getting most of our calls to play from. We're getting a lot of calls from people who are having weddings and bar mitzvahs, obviously, but we're also getting a lot of calls to do concerts. We're going to be playing a concert at Center East for the Society for Yiddish Culture on December 16th at 2:30 in the afternoon. That's going to be a really wonderful concert. The Society for Yiddish Culture is a great organization that is working very hard to keep the Yiddish culture and the roots of Yiddish culture alive, and we kind of see ourselves as fulfilling that sort of role. On the one hand, in our live performances, we play this music, and when we're not performing, we spend a lot of time actually going back and researching this music and trying to present as accurate and authentic a representation and reproduction of the original klezmer music as we possibly can.
I think it was one member of your group said, it goes back to the 78 RPM records. Is there a different kind of energy that goes into this music? Obviously, you're very proficient musicians. You've played other kind of music, classical, rock, contemporary. Is there a different kind of energy that goes into playing klezmer, Kurt?
I don't know if it's a different kind of energy, but every style of music requires an approach that's appropriate to it, and I know I feel different playing klezmer music. I think differently as I play than I do when I play jazz or when I play classical music.
How is it possible? When I said in the introduction, I almost felt there were cries and there were laughs coming out of your clarinet. Is that intentional?
Oh, yeah. Well, not necessarily intentional that they sound like a cry or a laugh, but they're very intentional effects, and they do sound often very much like a cry or a laugh, and they feel something like that.
Now there is another group in Chicago. How are you different stylistically? I mean, can klezmer music differ and vary at all?
Oh, very much so. As a matter of fact, in listening to the source records that we have at our disposal for learning this music, there's quite a wide range in the different sorts of styles. The older klezmer styles played more of a string-oriented sort of a music with the cembalo, or a large hammer dulcimer, and violins. And the later, as time went on, these bands became more brass and horn-oriented, with more trumpets and trombones and clarinets. So we're trying to retain a lot of the feeling of the older style with the stringed instruments and that sort of thing, while introducing some of the more
sort of a dance band orientation.
Yeah, of a larger band. One of the things that we're very lucky in is that Kurt here is such a fabulous clarinet player. We've actually managed to go back and retrieve some of these spectacular solo clarinet performers like Naftuli Brantwine, and who are some others?
Dave Terrace.
Dave Terrace, who were just really the bright lights of klezmer in the early days, and Kurt has managed to actually recreate those sounds very authentically. The other bands that are playing klezmer music in Chicago, it seemed to me, are more sort of more Freilach bands than actually straight klezmer bands. They play music, they play some of the traditional Jewish Freilachs and that sort of thing, whereas we are actually authentically recreating the sound of the klezmer bands of the early part of the century.
So you've really stamped a mark and having your own style. I did notice you have a woman, you may want to, I don't know her name.
Well, we should tell the rest of the members of the band. We have today Jeff Check playing bass with us, and Audrey Morrison on the trombone and percussion.
Now, Audrey obviously stood out as being the only woman. She was playing a trombone. Would we have seen that 70 years ago?
Not very likely.
I don't think you would have seen it in Europe. However, it's interesting to note here that Abe Schwartz, who was one of the big klezmer stars of the early part of the century in New York, was often accompanied by his daughter on his recordings.
But she played the piano. And in those days, it was not uncommon for a woman to be presented with a band playing the piano or singing, but very seldom doing anything else. It was very unusual.
And also having non-Jews in the group, too. I mean,
actually, that was not quite as unusual in the old days as it may have seemed, because a lot of the sessions that the klezmer bands, the klezmer recording sessions, in a lot of cases, in order to fill out a band or fill out a particular sound, they would use regular session musicians to fill out the sound of the sessions. And this was often also the case in Yiddish theatrical recording sessions, so that there was some overlap between the klezmer scene and the early jazz and early pop scenes.
And you're someone who has produced records, you're a musical producer, you're also producing plays, you've been in studios, no doubt. How do you think your klezmer forefathers would react, let's say, seeing you in a studio, headsets on, playing klezmer music to record a record? I mean, very, very high tech, or even here in the studio today.
Well, they were a very adaptable bunch. I think they'd say, oh, that's great. You know what happened
How about to your music?
To our music? I think it would definitely ring a bell. I think what we've done is really managed to recreate something that they would be able to relate to very well.
People who have heard this and hear our music always come up and tell us about it. They tell us that they remember. We've met people from Russia and from Romania people from Poland who heard music either just like this or similar to this, depending on what region they came from. But they usually say that they like what we're doing, but also that they find that it's very, very reminiscent of the way they heard it played. Not just the tunes, but the style and the feel of it.
Being a jazz musician, is playing it any different as far as technique? Is it harder, easier? Because the sounds are different. When we hear a jazz musician, we think of improv. It just all seems to flow together. And this too seems almost improvisational. Was it easier or harder?
I can't say. I think
You
for
make it look
me
very
anyway,
easy.
for me, every music you play, you do the best you can. You try as hard as you can. So even if it's easy music, I'm trying harder than to be conscious of phrasing or to improve my sound. If it's faster, more technically demanding music, then that occupies my attention. But there's always more than enough to devote your effort and your attention
Well,
to.
you make it look just effortless. And before we close, Stuart, I want you to repeat where your concert's going to be and why people should come. Your last appeal.
Well, they should come because it's going to be a great time. We're going to have a lot of fun at this show. It's going to be at Center East on December the 16th at 2:30 in the afternoon. That's a Sunday afternoon. For more information or for tickets, you can call 675-3335. That's the Society for Yiddish Culture who's sponsoring the performance. And we're looking forward to seeing a lot of people there. This will be our first major performance in the Chicago area in about 2 or 3 months. So we're going to have a real good time with it. And the main reason people should come is because they'll love the music, and we love to play it.
Terrific. Well, you look like you're having a very good time up there. Thank you so much for being with
Thank you,
us.
Debbie.
Thank you.
And
very
thank you for
much.
watching this edition of Jerusalem Cafe.